He is a regional personality in the Piggly Wiggly footprint. You can read his words for The Athletic and hear him talk on Sirius XM, the Andy Staples Show, and today on the Georgia Show. He is Andy Staples. Andy, look, last night you had the playoff rankings reveal show in between those basketball games. Kentucky trying to remind Mark Stoops that it's a basketball school. What a night, man.
Yeah, Oscar Schwebwe fouled out, and I realized I'm glad I don't cover college basketball because I've not learned how to spell Schwebwe yet, but I have learned how to pronounce it, so I'm good. I'm good there. But, yeah, it was weird watching the basketball because it did force me into thinking about college basketball about 2.5 months before I was ready to.
Same. Totally. Status quo 1 through 4. What's the biggest speed bump you can foresee between now and Selection Sunday? Well,
in the top 4, I think TCU going to Baylor this week, and depends on what Baylor they get. If they get the Baylor that played K-State, I don't think TCU have much of a problem with them. But this is a rivalry game. It's I think a 3.5-point spread. You know, if Blake Shapen plays well for Baylor, he's been very up and down, then this game could go to the wire. And if TCU loses it, I don't know where the committee places them. I don't know how they feel about a potential 12-1 Big 12 champ TCU versus, say, a 12-1 Pac-12 champ USC or an 11-1 Tennessee. I don't know where that slots in. I know a 13-0 TCU is making the playoff. There's no question about that. The question is if they were to drop one, and I think this would be the one they drop, then what happens?
So Kentucky quarterback Will Levis did the mayonnaise in his coffee thing.
Mm-hmm.
You've tried that.
Yep.
You drank mustard.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all wager cottage cheese on your show. You talk about filet-o fishes. I mean, it's a very culinary, interesting experience every time I listen to y'all talk. So that makes me wonder what is next on the Andy Staples Show menu as it relates to college football.
It's a good question. So Ari Wasserman, my podcast co-host, and I will be in Las Vegas for championship weekend. We're doing some live shows from Mandalay Bay from the sports book on championship Saturday and on the day that they reveal the playoff bracket. And we figure we're going to be there anyway, so let's go to the Pac-12 championship game on Friday night, and we'll cover that. And we're thinking we should place a bet on it. And so there is a place... It's on the Strip. It's called Nacho Daddy. It's gourmet nachos, which wonderful, wonderful things. But they have a scorpion tequila shot. Where basically it's a tequila shot with a scorpion in it.
Yeah, you got to do that.
I think the loser's going to have to take the scorpion shot.
Is it a live scorpion?
Pretty sure it's dead. Pretty sure they couldn't do the live scorpion. That would be very dangerous.
I covered the NFL owners meetings in Atlanta a few years ago, and I'll never forget this. This is when
Mark Davis was eating live scorpions?
About to find out that they were hosting the draft or something like that. I can't remember. But it was this hotel boardroom. We were standing in the hallway with some Arizona State Patrol guys because they're the security detail. And I'll never forget, I had just watched Casino. And I asked them, I said, do y'all actually try to trace down bodies that are buried in the desert and all that kind of thing? And this guy looks at me. He's a Native American security State Patrol guy, very stoic look in his eye, and he says, we don't really spend too much time because by the time they go missing out there, either the coyotes or the scorpions have done away with them. And that's a quote that will never leave me, Andy. So keep that in mind when you drink those scorpions. You can't take them lightly. Don't get lost.
As a Floridian I live in a state where there are many, many things that can kill you, but coyotes and scorpions stripping your corpse in a desert sounds like one of the worst things ever.
That's I realize you're already dead. Go out.
But yeah.
All right. Speaking of Levis's mayo lattes, what is up with him this year? He had a ton of hype coming in. Did he just fall off, or did you foresee a little bit of Levis not being able to live up to the hype even going into the season?
I don't know that I foresaw any of that. I didn't foresee his offensive line being as bad as they've been, and that is really the problem. If you look at Will Levis's actual numbers, he's not been that bad. But they're an offense that really doesn't expect him to put up massive numbers. They're not expecting the kind of numbers that Drake May puts up for North Carolina or Hendon Hooker puts up for Tennessee. They expect him to be more in the Stetson Bennett vein. But the problem is they've not been able to block. They can't get the running game going. But I mean, Will Levis is completing 66% of his passes. He's averaging 8.6 yards, perfectly fine numbers, but not good enough to carry Tennessee to any sort of competitive, equity with Georgia or with Tennessee or with anybody like that this season.
Yeah, it's. I think the thing that jumps off to me is just some of the yardage numbers in some of his games. But as you said, maybe they're not asking him to really air it out a ton, and that's probably a factor. I want to take a look at the mental side of the game. You worked on a book called Getting to Neutral with the late Trevor Moawad, and Georgia used his expertise. A lot of programs have. Mm-hmm. The Dogs are now using a mental coach named Drew Brannon. And I think obviously it's working when you look at the mentality of this team week in and week out. But for me, it's fascinating to see how much time programs are spending dialing in on the mental side of the game. And you kind of got to look at that. It's not just a box that they check. It's a real focus for a lot of these programs.
Yeah, it's an everyday focus, and I know it is at Georgia because Trevor worked with Georgia when Kirby got there. Basically, until Trevor got cancer, he was working and actually while he was doing chemo for the 2019 season, was still working with them. And he worked with Jimbo Fisher's Florida State teams. He worked with Nick Saban in Alabama, and it is something that especially a program like Georgia will harp on every single day. They've created an entire architecture. There's a language they speak that those players understand. Because I've written 2 books with Trevor. When Georgia players are in press conferences, they say a lot of things that sort of, oh yeah, I know where that's from, and you'll hear a lot. They'll use phrases like the aggregate of marginal gains. You'll hear phrases like they talk about neutral thinking and trying to make sure they don't let the past influence the future and stuff like that. And it works. It really does work because it's how you deal with stress. It's how you deal with tough situations. And if you are, kind of just all over the map emotionally, it's very hard to do that. And it's very hard to get yourself, like if you lose a game, it's hard to get back and figure things out. Like after they lost the SEC championship game, I was never worried about Georgia after that game in terms of getting back to the right mindset because I know exactly how Kirby teaches them to do that. And it's one of those things where it happened. We're going to look at why it happened. We're going to try to fix the mistakes that made it happen. But that's it. We're not dwelling on it anymore. We're moving on to the next play. And it's really kind of a distillation of that old cliche of one play at a time, one game at a time, all that stuff. But like if you look at those Alabama teams that won national titles and why, because that's what Georgia's doing right now, and Nick Saban has done it for years at Alabama. Like they don't lose games to bad teams. Like they don't just have that stinker game where you're like, what the hell happened there? It's because of that mentality. They basically, an Alabama player is taught from the moment he sets foot on campus, and a Georgia player is taught from the moment he sets foot on campus. It's not about whether you win or lose. The scoreboard doesn't matter. Dominate the next rep, the next meeting, the next play in the game. That's it. That's all you should be thinking about. If you're thinking about a scoreboard on Saturday, you're wasting your time.
Yeah, I've seen it kind of manifest itself in Kirby's mannerism on the sideline. I mean, you go back to the first couple years he was there. He was all over the place. Look, he'll still chew some ass. Yep. I mean, he'll get after his players if they mess up, but he has a lot more composure, and it had to have been a third party because that's just the way he was wired.
I'll give you an example of it. In the Rose Bowl against Oklahoma, I don't think Kirby'd mind me saying this. Trevor's told this story in a bunch of places before he passed. Kirby came to him and said at halftime, "I'm having a little trouble getting to neutral here," and Trevor, just said, "Hey, look, everything that's happened has happened. But here's just your situation." At that point, remember, they just kicked that field goal. So things were finally starting to look up for Georgia. And if you think about that halftime, Kirby made a really key defensive adjustment that changed everything. He basically, he brings another player down into the box, and he told his DBs, you are going to have to cover one-on-one. I realized that we spent 3 weeks practicing for this, saying, we don't think you can cover one-on-one. We want to play zone here. You're going to have to cover one-on-one because Baker Mayfield's going to pick us apart otherwise. And guess what? They shut him down after that. Or at least shut him down enough.
Sure did.
So
Oklahoma fans may disagree and blame that on Lincoln Riley, but
Oklahoma had a defensive touchdown in that second half. Let's not forget that.
No, that happened. That did happen. Last one for you, Andy. Look, there's a lot of talk right now about Stetson Bennett and his story, and a lot of people say that it will become the next Rudy film, okay? You could have a story biopic made of
Stetson Bennett's actually good, though. That's the difference.
Yeah. Yeah, he's balling out, and he's playing a lot. My question for you is, who would you cast as the mailman in the Stetson Bennett movie?
My kids have aged out of all those Disney Channel sitcoms, because I'm guessing whoever that person is right now is starring on a Disney Channel sitcom. It's somebody like we wouldn't know, but some 9-year-old would know.
Yeah,
my kids don't watch those shows anymore, so I'm not up on it. But I'm trying to think of are any of the kids from Cobra Kai kind of capable of it? Like,
or how about from your era? If it didn't have to be.
Listen, I'd go Sean Astin. I'd go Rudy himself.
Rudy back out there.
Samwise Gamgee. Heck yeah. Let's rock and roll.
That would be a box office hit. That would crush.
Yes. I think is it bad? Did Sean Astin play a walk-on so well that I cannot imagine anybody else playing a walk-on? He's got a good cast of characters though. He was the kind of the dirtbag brother in 50 First Dates. He's got some range. Well, I mean, he is the true hero of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So, I mean, let's be real here. So,
Stetson Bennett is carrying the dogs up that mountain, man.
Are there any other Astons? Because Sean was originally the other Aston, because there was Mackenzie Aston who was on Facts of Life. He was the kid they brought in to freshen things up after a while. Yeah, but I think Sean is Mackenzie's brother, and so they're like, oh, there's another Aston brother, and then he winds up being Rudy.
After the Goonies, he was not looking back from there.
Exactly.
Andy, you're a good sport. Thanks, man. Have a great rest of your season. Best of luck in Vegas with that Scorpion, and I hope you make it out of there alive, man.
My pleasure, Wes. And what's Reptile? What's his last name?
Oh, Reptile Henderson, yeah.
Reptile Henderson. I really need to follow his recruitment. If you can get me in touch with his handler, I want to make sure I get a top 5 for him. At least
he's already working on some NIL deals behind the scenes. So
good to know. Good. I don't know. He's got one of those lawyers out in California that pumps up the market. I expect nothing less from Reptile.
Appreciate it, Andy. Take it easy, man.
All right. See you, Wes.